What branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Army. Do you want my name?
Oh yeah, what is your name? Yeah.
Doug Colby.
Okay. So what was the highest rank you achieved?
I was a specialist, Spec 4.
What was your birthday?
My birthday?
Yeah.
7/6/59.
Oh, this is Caledonia, Michigan. And it's May. What's today's date, Dad?
22nd.
Yes.
May 22nd.
I know that one.
You are a friend of my dad at his work.
Yeah.
And then my dad's filming this. And this is an interview conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, what were your parents' occupations, and could you tell us a little bit about your siblings, I guess?
Let's see. My dad was a civil engineer. My mom, I don't know, she was like a homemaker. She was an artist, I guess. My siblings, I came from, it was like 7 of us, so there's a whole bunch. There's a few who are civil engineers, actually. I'm the youngest boy.
Okay. So, what were you doing before you entered the service?
Flailing around, trying to find a job. It was, it was 79. It was kind of a lousy time to find a job.
Yeah.
I went to college for a year, and I actually did pretty well, but I wasn't really into it. I kind of felt like I wanted to do something more. So.
Did you have any other family members that were in the service?
Yeah, my oldest brother was a Seabee in the Navy.
Okay. So were you drafted or were you enlisted?
I enlisted.
Wait, so why did you enlist?
Well...
Which I think you said something earlier. But...
Yeah, sort of. Mostly it was just to kind of... I just wanted to do something with my life. Mm-hmm. Is kind of more why I did it, that and so I could go to school. I wanted to just pay for my own. I didn't want my dad to pay for it. So that was kind of something that I wanted to do.
So what was like training camp and like your early days of training like?
Well, it wasn't very fun. It was kind of like the movies where they swear a lot and they're really mean. It was a lot like that because most of the drill sergeants I had were ex Vietnam vets. They were actually in Vietnam. Yeah. And so they were pretty crazy, mostly. So.
Oh goodness.
And it was really hot. I was at Fort Bliss in Texas, and I got there in May. Oh. So it was, and I'm from Michigan, so it was kind of like, we got off the bus, and I remember I was like going, geez, what is it, 1,000 degrees here?
Yeah.
It's like really hot. So that was kind of bad. But after a while, you actually get used to it. It was the funniest thing. After about a month or so, I was like kind of
enjoying it.
Well, it didn't seem so hot. You had to drink more water because you were constantly sweating, but you just kind of got used to it. It's kind of a funny thing.
Did you receive any specialized training for what you did?
Well, I don't know if it was specialized, but yes, probably, because I had a kind of a funny job. I was an operations intelligence specialist, I think was the title. And it was like, actually, back then they used to have a commercial. And it was one of the things I knew about the job before I got it. Because the guys stood behind this plastic glass and they wrote on the back. Mm-hmm. So they had to write backwards. Oh. So one of the things I had to learn was how to write backwards on a piece of plastic.
Oh my goodness.
It was kind of weird. But, it was air defense, and it was in the operations area. So most of the time I was involved with a TOC. It was a I mean, basically it's a big radio truck.
Mm-hmm.
And it folded open, so it was really big.
Yeah.
And I was the guy that drove it. And then I'd like set it all up, and I'd put up all this camo netting, and I'd set up the radios.
Yeah.
And I'd make the coffee.
Okay.
Get the generators going, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, after a while, I was like, had other guys who worked for me. You know, at first I worked for the other guys, and, you know, but they were just other guys like me. They weren't, you know, sergeants or anything. It was just regular. So, but, you know, we just did the work.
Okay.
And then we had to be the radio guys. So,
yeah.
you know, you had to learn how to use the radio. And the other thing we did was we had to be able to read a map.
Yeah.
So you had to learn how to read a map really well. And that was kind of weird sometimes, but I don't know. It was all pretty interesting. You know, you had to learn the stupid letters, those military letters.
Oh, the Morse code.
Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta.
Yeah.
I probably can do them all, but you probably don't need to hear them.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So where did you like tour, like for duty and stuff?
Well, like I said, I started in the desert in Texas, and then I actually was going to be airborne. It was actually kind of funny. I went to airborne school in Fort Benning, Georgia, and I was there. I lasted 3 days. Anyways, one of my knees gave out, and so I wasn't going to be airborne after that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of interesting. I got to go to airborne training, and I lasted 3 days. But so then basically they sent me off to Fort Ord in California, which turned out to be a really cool place to go because it isn't there anymore. It was just north of Monterey, and Fort Ord actually had a beach on the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Like miles of beach. So you could go down.
You just go down there.
Yeah, you could just go down to the beach because you lived on the base. So anyways, that was pretty neat. So Fort Ord, I was at Fort Ord, and then after that I went to Germany, and I was stationed at Spangdahlem Air Base.
Oh, what was that like?
It was interesting. It was fun.
Did you ever like leave the camp and like have to talk to other people in different languages or?
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Nice cultural experience.
Yeah, I actually, I had a really stupid thing happen. I put in some paperwork to move off base, and I got my sergeant to sign it, and he had a heart attack that weekend.
Oh my goodness.
And so I actually got to move off base, and it never happened that people got to move off base if they weren't like married or like a sergeant or more. I wasn't a sergeant, so anyways, it was just a weird thing that happened, and then I got to move off base. So I ended up like living off base. I lived in Kielburg, Germany for quite a while.
Man.
And I had like it was actually an apartment. It was a kind of an apartment building. I think it just had three apartments, and there were like 3 stories. And the guys that lived downstairs were Army, and they were at another base nearby. And then I lived with an Air Force guy, and he was like a jet engine mechanic. I don't remember what kind. I think they were like F-16s or 15s, something like that.
So like, what kind of like friendships and like, you know, like I guess people always envision that like people in the military bond. I guess.
Oh, they're gonna be all buddies.
Yeah.
Well, like I didn't go to any war.
Yeah.
So it's kind of different if you don't do that. You don't seem to develop as tight a bond. I do know a couple guys that I was stationed here and there with, but not very many.
So not like other people that were on the radio or anything, really, or doing that kind of stuff.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
And even I actually tried to find some of them a couple times, and I've never had any luck. Well, I always try and find this friend of mine, Azillo. He was the guy who I lived in Kielburg with. He was in the Air Force, and we used to call him Crash Azillo because, like, when I met him, I was hanging around with another guy from Michigan, and we both had motorcycles. And the reason that I met Joey is because he went out for a motorcycle ride with this other guy, and he said, "Oh, can I ride it?" And so then he rode it until he crashed it, and then he bought it. So that's how I met him.
Wow.
And then
So did you get it running? Is it running again, Dad?
it started.
Okay. So like, how did you stay in touch with like family and stuff? Like, because you had a lot of siblings and stuff. So.
Yeah, I used to on Sunday I used to get a whole bunch of, well, in Germany. Well, and actually it was probably the same thing in California too. I used to get a whole bunch of change, and I'd go down to a local payphone, and you basically would just pay for it.
Oh.
And it would like you'd be talking to them, and it would go ching ching ching, and you'd have to put in 3/4.
Yeah.
Because it would tell you how many, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But after you did it a couple times, you knew like the deal.
Yeah.
And so you just show up with your big pile of quarters or whatever, and it, you know, it was a few bucks, but you know, you didn't have to do it every week. You know, I used to do it maybe once a month. You know, I'd try and call, you know, one or two sisters, maybe a brother, my parents I used to call, you know, try and call them probably more than anybody else, but you know, yeah, you can't do it all the time. It's too much. I mean, back then we didn't. Well, it's kind of expensive, so you know, not
Payphones.
yeah. Well, payphones or even regular phones were expensive. Long distance was expensive. You know, everybody would always call on Sunday. You know, after.
So were there like really long lines then for the phone and stuff, or?
No, there wasn't any lines. Not really,
No.
because I used to just go somewhere else. I didn't, because I always had transportation. Actually, all the time I was in, I had a motorcycle, so I used to go somewhere else. You know, it was a part of the Sunday experience was you'd go for a ride somewhere and then use a payphone, not right on the base. If you stayed on the base, yes, there would be a line, but I didn't ever monkey with that because the charge was the same.
Yeah.
No matter where you went.
And you got out and did other stuff. Yeah. Off the base. I guess like you weren't actually in any service, but and you didn't witness any injuries or casualties or anything really, right? Or
when I was in the reserve, a guy caught on fire.
Oh.
That was pretty bad. They had to medevac him. He did a really stupid thing. He didn't have a funnel, you know, a proper funnel for a 5-gallon gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The whole thing was really stupid, but I wasn't there, so I mean, I was there, but I wasn't. Well, I wasn't. I was there. You know, I was within 100 feet. I don't think I was like while I was sleeping, I was off. You know, you had to do shifts, and well, there was 2 generators, and normally what you did is you made sure one of them was all with new gas, you know, and then you started that, and then you shut the other one down, and then you could fill that one with gas once it cooled off. Yeah. Well, he was being lazy, and so he thought he could just pour the gas into one run, and it caught on fire, and so that he got burned. And
but he survived, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they took him to the hospital, but he got burned. I mean, he had like pretty bad burns on his hands, and I think he got a little on his face.
Goodness.
So it wasn't very good.
So like this was like for the reserves, you were in the United States though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was at Grayling.
Grayling?
Yeah. Michigan.
Michigan. Oh, that's here.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, that happened here.
Oh goodness. So like when you like left to go make those phone calls and stuff, like what kind of stuff would you do like off duty and like or off of the radio or whatever?
Well, you know, we used to have like parties with the Germans. Actually, Saturday night we used to try and have a party with all the local, you know, people our age, and what used to happen is these Germans would come over and they'd get in political arguments with us because they hated Reagan, and we all, you know, that he was like he was our president. We put up for him. I don't know. I mean, we didn't particularly care for him, but we weren't going to let Germans talk about him. So, you know, it would get tense, and sometimes we'd have words about that. And after a while, I told them, all right, no political discussions on Saturday. You guys can come over Sunday, and I'll provide beer for free for you.
Oh.
And then we'll argue politics, for a few hours,
Yeah.
and then I'll throw you all out, okay? And they were all happy about that. So we did that for, I don't know, I bet we did it for like 9 months,
Ah.
almost every weekend, as long as I was there. But
It's like, where did you meet these people, like, kind of?
just around. I mean, seems like we met. Seemed like, well, actually, probably at the little guest house. There was like these little guest houses that you could go to and get a beer, and they were kind of more like a local bar kind of thing, and you could go there. And a lot of times you'd run into people there, and you'd meet them. So that was one of the ways. Other thing was just like they would have these festivals in the streets on the weekends.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd meet people there, and I don't really remember how, but I mean there was a whole group of Americans there, and actually, and there was even a guy who was like a guy who was in the, I don't remember what branch of service, but he had retired. And he lived there, and he was an older guy, but he was an American guy, and he was married, and he lived like across the street from us. So we knew him too.
So he had a lot of contacts.
Well, yeah, you just kind of like, you'd have a party, and everybody and their brother would come over. You wouldn't even hardly know them,
Yeah.
Just same thing, like, probably just like, run on from high school. Practically like high school, only, everything was pretty legal.
And you could drink alcohol.
Yeah, it was pretty legal, and right, we didn't generally have. Seemed like we didn't really have many big fights that I can remember. I mean, it was usually pretty decent. But it was a small little village. I mean, I bet it was probably like 5,000 people, maybe, or less. It was a small little town. It was fun.
So, like, what kind of like things I know you were setting up radios and stuff, right?
Oh yeah, in the Army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what would they use those radios for? Because we weren't in a war. Like,
well, we used to go out. I think it was every month we went out for a weekend, and then every 3 months we went out for a week, and then I think it seems like it was like once or twice a year you went out for like 2 weeks or more. We had these different. Well, I mean, it was during the what they call the Cold War. So like we were trying to make the Russians think that we were ready to fight them.
Yeah.
So we were constantly sleeping in tents in the mud. I mean, and then you'd be out there, and and because we were operations, we'd have to go out and we'd have to, set up all the antennas and all that stuff. And then they'd go, oh, we gotta move. And it's like, okay, so it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we gotta take everything down with like little red flashlights so that, they can't see you. You couldn't have light. So you had to do it practically in the dark.
Oh,
they had these little red flashlights that were really lousy, but apparently from 100 feet away you can't see them. So, it's, so yeah, you were all the time doing stuff like that. And then, like on base, I ran actually I was a training NCO for a while. It seems like for the last almost year I was a training NCO. So.
Wait, so what's NCO?
Well, NCO is like sergeant. It's non-commissioned officer, but it was because I was in a position that was a higher position, even though that I didn't have the rank. It had to do with basically I took care of all the training cards. Like everybody has to go out and they have to register. They have to shoot their M16, and they have to get more than 22 in the target. You get to shoot 40, and if you get 40, then you're an expert. And if you get 22, you're okay.
Yeah.
So I was the one that kept track of the little cards
that
had their name on it and the fact that they did it and what day they did it, and then usually some captain or someone would have to sign it. I would have to make sure that the captain signed it and that it was filled out properly for, everybody in our unit. Like there was, I think there was like 100 people, in a unit.
Yeah.
So, it was a pretty good number of people. And then there was other stuff too, like you had to run 2 miles in some time, and you had to be able to do some number of push-ups, and I don't remember all of it. There was, and then you had to go once a year. You had to go get gassed, so you had to go in like a room with that awful tear gas stuff. You had to go in there with your mask on, and then they made you take it off so that you experienced it. So then you'd go running out of there, and sometimes you'd throw up, and it was pretty awful.
Just for like training or whatever?
Yeah, because you had to know what it was like,
In case you were ever in that.
Well, yeah, you want to get the thing on. You want to be motivated to get it on. And also you want to have it with you. Like, because if you don't have it, you can't put it on when the time comes. So, and then they had, there was a lot of different training. I mean, they did, trying to think of some other stuff. It seems like there was lots of different stuff. Like you had to, like the, of course, really that's all I did though. I just kept track of that kind of stuff, I guess. I'm thinking there was other stuff that would have been like more for your job. Like if you worked on a Jeep or something, you might have to do some kind of training once a year to make sure you knew about Jeeps. But I didn't really keep track of that. The other people did that, like the people in the motor pool, the sergeant down there would keep track of that stuff. They don't want much, do they?
No, yeah, it's like 20 minutes.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so like you served during like what we like consider the Cold War, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like where were you like when the Berlin Wall fell and all that was happening? Were you still in the service or?
No, I was out by then. But not by very long. I actually was done in 1986, and the wall came down in '89. So it was only 3 more years.
Yeah.
Also, I was pretty worried in, what was it, 90? Not really sure. I think it was like 90 or 91 that the first Iraq War started. And I was going, well, I hope this doesn't escalate because they'll probably come get me. It hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
It's like, like 5 years or something. It seemed like, I was I was a little worried, but it didn't happen, so that's good.
So like, where was like your last like couple of months of service? Was that like overseas in Germany or was that here in California?
No, it was overseas in Germany,
So like, when they brought you home, because they had civilian planes obviously by now, like, did they fly you over or did you have to ride on a ship or something?
No, they flew me over that time. Well, actually, my motorcycle came on a boat.
Oh, so they let you bring your stuff over on the...
Oh yeah, you could ship a boat. Actually, I rode my motorcycle from Monterey to San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Took it out on the wharf and had it shipped there, and then they shipped it over there, and then I rode it the whole time I was there, and then drove it to Bremerhaven, which is way in the north tip of Germany, to another place where the ships sit, apparently. And then, they shipped it to New Jersey, Bayonne, I think it was. Bayonne, New Jersey. And then after I got out, I went and had to go pick it up. So,
like, where in Germany were you stationed? Because we have family over by Nuremberg. I was just wondering.
Might be close. I don't know exactly where Nuremberg is. It north?
East. It's on the east. Yeah.
On the east.
Yeah.
Well, Spangdahlem is actually quite close to Luxembourg. It's about middle high.
Oh, so you were like in all the northwest. Yeah.
Not really north though. It's kind of in the middle, because actually it was close to France too.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's like right near the, I think it's the Ardennes forest. That's reasonably close.
But so like near Frankfurt, kind of, or within
Frankfurt's pretty far from where I was at. Actually, I think it was actually 8 hours.
Oh, goodness.
I know, I was like, well, that was on a bus, I suppose. It seemed like it were 4, something crazy. I don't remember.
So you weren't near any major cities, really?
Cologne.
Cologne. All
It
right.
was pretty close to Cologne and Luxembourg. Bitburg.
Mhm.
Do you
I don't know where that is. No.
they're all near Cologne, really.
Oh.
They're just littler cities.
So like, were you married when you went into the service, or
Mm-mm. No.
did you get married when you came out? Or?
No.
No.
I never
Never
did.
got married.
No, not then. No, not till few 5 more years later. Really.
I guess that kind of like leaves our like last two questions. Like, so how did your like experience in the war like affect what you did when you came out, kind of like, or your life?
I made my bed regularly.
Oh.
Better than I used to. I never used to do it very well.
Sergeants.
Now I made my bed. You know, it was really a lot of it was just good habits for me. Kind of ended up being kind of good habits and kind of motivated me to be a little more proactive about just getting up and doing stuff. And like sometimes if I feel stress, I can shift into a little more military thought pattern where I'm more aggressive and more abrupt.
Oh.
You know.
So it did like it changed your I guess.
Well, it just gives you some tools that you can use, kind of.
Yeah.
Because like if someone isn't very nice to you, and all of a sudden you've decided you've had enough of this person, it's pretty easy to shift into this kind of military persona that was really tough, that didn't take anything from anybody, because the drill sergeants teach you that. They teach you a lot over and over. You get to familiar with that, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing you would take into battle. You have to be tough if you're gonna survive.
Did you feel like your family and like your community like received that you like went into the service well, or did you feel like? Because I know like the Vietnam vets like weren't treated very well, but like you didn't really. You were in the Cold War.
I didn't really. It was fine when I came back, because it wasn't really like any big deal, so I didn't really care.
Was it like your family proud, or?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Seemed like I kind of came home and decided to kind of make peace with my dad. We never really got along very well, so it was kind of I just kind of decided that I was going to do that, and so when I came home, he probably thought I was very different. I didn't really feel like I was that different, but I mean, it was just different because it was a different time, and I, had decided that might as well try and get along with him. He's gonna be my dad. That's just how it is, So I did, and it worked out well. I mean, it was nice. He actually got quite nice after a while. It was kind of strange.
Yeah. So like, do you use anything like from the military? Like, because I know you work with my dad at a credit. Like you help out credit unions.
No, I don't.
You don't use anything.
I don't use anything.
No.
Well, yeah, no, nothing, zero.
No.
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I suppose you could say I can get there on time.
You're punctual, yeah.
I mean, yeah. Well, it's such a technical thing that I do that it isn't really anything like anything I ever did in the military. I mean, the stuff I did in the military was, it was just way different. It just wasn't,
So do you have anything like for our generation that you want to tell us, I guess, about like the military?
Well, it's funny how things change after it's happened. You probably already have found out, because you've been to school, how when you went to 4th grade, it seemed awful when you were in it, and then when you were in 5th grade, all of a sudden it seemed way better, and you can kind of maybe extrapolate that a little and get to the point where you're thinking, oh, well, like if you actually had interest in being a pilot or working in some areas that were actually applicable rather than the Army. I would say that Army is the greatest place to go. But I think the Air Force or the Navy certainly could be, if you liked nautical things, or if you were interested in mapping, or radar or something or other. I mean, if you had any interest in it, then I think, oh, geez, I don't know. I think it could be very good because it's really not that awful of a life.
Right.
I mean, but you kind of have to be willing to deal with it as it is. You can't go in thinking you're going to change it. So it's kind of it ends up being kind of life-changing because of that, I think. And so, I don't know, I mean, as long as you're not, if you don't have a lot of preconceptions about it to begin with, you might not find it too awful. I mean, I spent, the first 2 months in basic, they were so awful. I kept thinking, oh my God, if I could only do an epileptic seizure, maybe I could get out of this, I'll just pretend to do it. And I'll be able to pull it off, and then they'll let me out.
Yeah.
And I never had the guts to do it, but I thought about it almost every day. It was always
that bad. Yeah.
Well, they were really awful. Gee, they were always in your face yelling at you, and they swore all the time. And I mean, it's just really degrading. It's tough. It's hard. And then just the physical stuff that goes with it. I mean, geez, you get done, you feel like you never knew what it was like to be in shape. I mean, I never did. I wasn't in sports or anything, so I didn't know anything about anything. And so, I mean, it's, so it changes you, not necessarily all good, but it does change you, and, it has an effect. So, I mean, for whatever that's worth, I mean, the military I think you probably could apply what I'm saying to an awful lot of things. To be honest.
College,
I mean, because a lot of it is like that. And after you get through it, it doesn't seem as bad. After it's done, you go, oh, well, it was kind of fun. I did this.
Yeah.
I mean, like one of the things I did when I was in is I got to go and spend a day with German soldiers, and we marched up the Alps.
Mm.
And when we got to the top, they had this big cabin, and it was next to a stream, and it was in the Alps, and it was in the fall, and it was reasonably warm. It was maybe 65 degrees, but the water was really cold, and no Americans would go in it. Mm-hmm. I looked at them all and said, geez, I'm in Lake Superior. This ain't that cold. Yeah. So I got in, and I was the only American, so I was a captain the rest of the night, and I sat next to the other captains. Mm-hmm. I had German captain bars on my collar.
Oh, goodness.
And spent, it was fun. But, it's a good memory. You think, oh, I did that crazy shit.
Yeah.
Whatever, it was fun.
Military's good, yeah.
Well, it's like, it's kind of what you make it. If you can, feel good about it, then it's reasonably good. You don't have to fixate on people getting burned up or
whatever,
or people dying for that matter. I mean, holy schmoly! I mean, it can be pretty bad. Wasn't for me, but it's not like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
It's like, what did your brother go into? Just like one final question.
Well, he was a civil engineer.
Oh.
So he went to Vietnam, and he spent like half of his term in Hanoi in an office building. Mm-hmm. And then after that, he went to the Philippines, and he was there in an office building. He did like bridges and roads.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like you two were anywhere near each other, right?
Oh no, he was what is he? 14 years older than me.
Oh goodness. So he was in the Vietnam War, yeah.
He was in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
That was he was in the like the late 60s, I think. So.
Yeah.
Right, and then 16 years later, I was in.
You were in. Oh.
I went in 1980. I went in for the Iran, the Iran crisis. I thought we were going to go to work with Iran, so.
We ended up going.
But we didn't, so that was okay.
Yeah.
but it seemed like we might, because it was pretty awful that they took all our people.
Fortunately, we never ended up getting them off.
Well, Reagan was pretty tough, but he didn't ever send us to war, so that's good.
Yeah. So I guess again, I guess that's it.
Okay. We're gonna thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you for allowing me to interview.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
I hope it wasn't too frightening. I try to keep it a little clean.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Don't stop.
Alright, yeah. I guess thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure. I hope you get
That's good. Good score. Yeah, no.
something out of it. It's a lot of